Network Entertainment.
Hi girls and boys, kami ang Lady Boses!
Mga sister, let's
CR tayo, let's go!
Alright. Oo.
So meron akong ask ko lang. Ang ask ko lang, ano yung greatest fear ninyo sa stage na pwedeng mangyari while performing?
Pero wait, bago nyo isagutin yan, meron tayong Yes. First time natin na ganito tayo kadami dito sa Lady Boses. Oo. Sila ang Bitches and Stitches Manila. Si Fran, si Ronnie, tsaka si Ina. Woo! Say hi, girls.
Hi,
what's up?
Hi. Ayun. Lahat kami dito, we're all stand-up comedians. So, yes. Dumadami ang mga babae sa stand-up comedy scene dito sa Manila. So, yun nga. Sagutin natin yung tanong ni Kay.
Ako siguro, sa stand-up, siguro yung may mag-heckle. Tapos, mabablock-out ka na hindi mo alam kung paano siya i-handle. Siguro yun sa akin.
Oo, mahirap yun eh. Tapos hindi mo alam kung yung banter mo sa kanya, baka ma-offend siya.
Correct.
Or parang when the show's over na, you're home na, and you're like, shit.
Oo
Tapos,
nga.
yun pala yung like,
I should have said this.
clapback ko. Yeah, exactly.
My fear is a little bit different actually because for me, I prepare for hecklers. Meron akong mga comeback that I've memorized. I get very specific kinds of heckles for my kind of comedy. So I have different clapbacks for all of that. But my biggest fear is that I'm gonna fart. Like a loud, like you know, like the loud, the long, like really like mabaho kind of like sounding farts. That's my biggest fear.
Pero funny yun. Parang tatawa sila.
Pero you should prepare for it. Like, kunwari, if ever na you fart, dapat you have to prepare something.
Happy New Year!
Oo nga, no? Totoong fear pala yun. Hindi ko naisip.
I get gas kasi when I'm nervous.
Ako talaga makalimutan
Oo.
kung ano yung sasabihin.
Pareho
Yun pa
tayo.
rin. Yun pa rin yung anxiety ko. Kaya hindi pa rin ako bumabalik.
No, please come back.
Kasi
We love you.
Yun yung scary talaga.
Ma-blackout.
Parang never pa siya nangyari talaga. Pero tuwing sasalang talaga ako, yun yung fear ko. Kaya kahit kabisado ko na siya, tinitingnan ko pa rin yung setlist.
Totoo.
Ganun. Grabe yung anxiety.
Totoo. Kasi ako, pareho tayo ng fear. Kasi medyo OC ako pagdating sa set. So kung meron akong hindi nakalimutan, hindi ako maka-move on dun sa next.
Tama.
So,
Shit, may mali akong word.
Parang gano'n.
So what do you do if you do forget something? Has it ever happened where you're like, oh, I forgot this punchline or I forgot this like one-liner?
Nagpapanik ako.
You know what, Fran? It happened to me during one of the open mics.
Ay,
And
oo.
it was a new joke, so I forgot how to deliver the entire joke.
And she was drunk.
Yeah. I just drank like one. I'm not used to alcohol, so my tolerance is really low. So good thing GB gave me another chance to go up on stage and then tell the joke properly.
Oh, that's really good.
Ang galing, saan to?
Wicked Dogs.
Wicked Dogs.
Nalimutan ko talaga. Basta parang nag-stare na lang ako into space. And then I went back up on stage and then did the joke again. Kasi parang hindi ako mapapanatag na leaving the joke without not giving it justice.
For me, I get really obvious if I forget something. And then I make the mistake of when I have a new joke, I don't always try it at an open mic. Sometimes I just try it at a show. And I don't think that's the right way to do it, but I keep doing it. I don't know. It's when my inspiration happens or something, and sometimes I'm just like, oh. And then the audience knows that I'm thinking, and I have to apologize and be like, you know what, guys? I think I'm going to do that again. Is it okay if I do it again?
At least you're honest.
I have nowhere else, or like nowhere else to go, diba? But I can't just go off stage and come back. So I have to just
You're like, wait lang.
yeah.
You're
I have to
owning
just
up to the honesty.
be honest with them and be like, can I try this again? Are you guys okay with that? And then I think if you're authentic naman about where you're at and it's a supportive crowd, then it's okay. But yeah, it's a scary feeling. I have kodigo na nga sometimes that I like write on my like arm. Yeah, bullet points.
Sana may prompter tayo. No?
Yeah.
I think the thing with me is that my biggest fear is that I run out of time because I do have the tendency, especially if I'm familiar with the material, that I'll probably end up improving when I shouldn't and sort of extending certain things and trying new things out, that I end up spending more time than I should. And I try to be very time conscious because the moment I see someone go like this, you telling me to wrap up, I'm like, oh my God, we gotta finish it. Ugh. So I think that's where my fear is.
The light gives me anxiety when they show you that 1 minute left light, and then there's always two instincts, right? You either want to be like, and now I'm gonna tell this new 5-minute bit that I've been working on, or you panic and you just say your 1 minute very, very fast.
Yeah.
I think that's also the other thing where I struggle if like I'm on an open mic and I'm like somewhere later down the line, especially if there's like 17 to 20 comedians there. And I think especially if like, you know, it's in an environment where the comedians are mostly men and they make, you know, jokes about women and, you know, jokes that sort of border into like, not queer phobia, but, you know, they make gay jokes or trans jokes. So I think when I'm in a position like that and people have been hearing these things and they see me and you don't know how to respond with them or try to trigger them, because I do like doing crowd work. And if I'm dealing with an unresponsive audience, that totally gets to me.
Oo, nakakatakot yung you're talking to them. Tapos parang titignan ka lang na parang,
So what's your advice?
kasi ako material-based talaga ako eh. So, I try not to, yun yung kahinaan ko naman. That's my, weakness. Yung hindi ako masyado nag-engage with the audience. Kasi, yun nga, nakakatakot. What if hindi nga sila sumagot? So, parang, crickets. Okay.
Like, I remember during one open mic, I was gonna set up a bit, and it's a very story-focused bit, and it starts with me talking to the audience. So I tried getting into the bit and talking to the audience, and they were just dead the whole time, and I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And I remember that was the only open mic where I like straight up bailed in the middle of the set.
Talaga?
Yeah, I was like, the moment I saw this, I was like, you know what? And I was like straight up with the audience because I try to be honest also like France. So it was like, okay, I'm not going to finish this. Before my anxiety attack takes me over, I'm leaving. Bye.
I mean, sometimes it's all you can do, right? If the audience isn't completely engaged, you can either do something to make them more engaged. Where my first technique, I think, is I try to go big. You're like, what? That's not gonna get a reaction out of you? Okay, now I'm gonna scare you. I'm gonna look you in the eye and talk about my vagina. So that's my first instinct is to do that. But then if that doesn't work, then what else can you do, right? I think there's something to be said about, even if your time's not up yet, you can call it a night. Diba? You could be like, you know what? I don't think I'm gonna win them over in 2 minutes if the first 3 didn't work. So, bye, thank you. I think there's a way to like exit gracefully.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I feel like same with Ronnie. Like my when I first started doing comedy, like the first club I ever did, they had this like giant iPad stuck to the ceiling that was like this countdown of like the time that you had left.
Whoa.
And because it's so because this like the slots are so competitive, like if you're consistently over, they'll like blacklist you. So you had to be really tight with time. So now I think one of the things that I get really scared of is like, parang I'll like go too fast. So I'll have enough material prepared, but because if it's newer, I don't want to forget any of it. So it's like teleprompter in my head, like read everything out so everything's like out in the open. And then I'll be like, oh crap, I've got like a minute left, and I'm just like
Where did you start pala, Christina?
I started in London last year. And parang, I mean, I'd been performing for a while. And I took a break from like acting because I was like, I don't know if I'm any good at this. But parang, I feel like I was like, sige na nga, I'll just give it a go. Like, what's the worst that could happen? And I really loved it. But then apparently, these fears are the worst things that can happen when you go on a stage. They're very real.
Pero yun nga yung kaibahan, no? The difference between yung stand-up abroad. Parang strict sila sa time. Dito, medyo lenient tayo sa time. I don't know why. Filipino time siguro.
I think Hong Kong
5
is
minutes,
the
but it's
same.
7.
Yeah, Hong Kong is the same. They say, number one rule, respect the light. If you go over the light, we will blacklist you. And then they really get mad at you, and they won't book you if you go over time. But I guess, yeah, Filipino time is...
Pero how long is overtime sa inyo? Like a minute?
A minute.
A minute.
Yeah.
Pero under a minute, okay na.
I think
Like,
it's-
okay pa rin.
I think
it's fine.
Yeah, if you're like killing it also, I think
Oh,
they'll be
okay.
like, okay, fine. But then like 30 seconds I think is like okay. But if you're like a minute and over, you're like that's not okay.
Fran, kailan ka nag-start? When did you start comedy?
I started comedy in 2018 in Hong Kong after a breakup. I was going on a lot of Tinder dates, and I had been in this relationship for 7 years. So wala pang apps, no, and the last time I was single, and I just, got very drunk with power. Parang it's so easy. Swipe left, swipe right, order sex. It's like the food panda for sex. But all of my dates and a lot of the sex was very bad. And I was telling my girlfriends about all these bad dates, and they said, girl, we think you need a hobby. Maybe you should tell these stories on a stage. And I started going to open mics, and it wasn't until 2 years later that I started getting booked on paid gigs. But it was me and 6 other women in Hong Kong competing to be the one woman on like a 7-person lineup with like 6 guys. And I think at that point I was like, why are we fighting each other for the same slot? And then we're gonna tell jokes in front of men who don't understand what our experience is as women. And then that was the first Bitches and Stitches, which we formed in Hong Kong. And then we're doing something similar, I guess, here in Manila now.
Sabi ng friend mo, stop with the apps, start with the laughs.
But
Pero ang galing ng gusto ko yung anong tawag doon, yung sinabi mo, yung nakalagay doon sa mga poster na parang we don't fight for 5 minutes
in their spotlight,
Yeah.
we're building our own stage.
Oo, yun.
Yeah.
Pero itong mga friends mo, Fran, stand-up comedians na rin sila? Or
No.
hindi?
I was the only comedian in my friend group. And they were the ones who suggested it to me because they liked going to stand-up comedy. But no one else was a comedian. And I really had to start out like as the new girl, not knowing anyone, kind of being very shy. And all of you guys know me, and I'm a very extroverted person. So for me to be in a situation where I felt out of my comfort zone, be like, not naman starstruck, but just be like, wow, I can't believe like this person can tell 15 minutes of jokes on stage so confidently. And I was very insecure when I started. And I still get very nervous. I think I've been doing comedy for almost 7 years now. And I still get very nervous. At our last show, I vomited. Like,
Ako din,
like
I vomited.
5 hours before. Ako 5 hours before, you were like 5 hours after.
Ikaw, Ronnie, when did you start?
My answer's kind of complicated because I actually initially started back in 2008, 2009 when Jack TV was doing like the whole stand-up stuff. And I actually went through like the same comedy workshop as guys like GB and Ryan and a lot of those dudes. But, at the time, I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. And because of that, my material just sucked. So I took almost 10 years away from stand-up, over 10 years actually, and I ended up being in professional wrestling at the time with in MWF. And in 2022, I got a message from Mike Unson, who was like, hey, I remember you used to do open mics. Why don't you try it again? So I did one open mic in November 2022, and yeah, I've been doing it. I've been back at it ever since. And I was so surprised that even after all that time, I still had like the basic structure of how to put together a 5-minute set. So doing that led me to you, it led me to you, and now here we are.
And we're so happy that we found each other.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Oo. Parang sobrang nagko-compliment kayong tatlo.
I would say, yeah, we're three very different personalities, different comedy styles, but I think it really makes like a very like robust kind of comedy group, and it makes a good lineup because you don't want, if you're a comedy group that's about diversity, you don't want the same kind of performer naman also, diba? So it's good to really find people with their own different styles and encourage them to tell jokes the way that feels natural to them.
Tell us more about Bitches and Stitches Manila. Like, yung
Okay.
Iniisip ko kung English ko tatagalog ko. Pero, yes.
So it was interesting because when I came to Manila last year and got involved in the local scene, I was just like, oh, there's an all-female comedy group, Lady Boses. And I expected that there would also be like more female comedians than in Hong Kong, because I think the Philippines is a more like matriarchal, like women-led society than Hong Kong is. I think women are a little bit more independent, even if we have no divorce. But still, I mean, in terms of like the percentage of women in the boardroom that we have in the Philippines compared to other Asian countries is really good. But I noticed also like there's really more men also in the comedy scene here, and I think it's just a very different kind of show when there's 5 guys or 6 guys and 1 girl. You know, you have guys tell these jokes that are oriented towards men, or coming from a position of male privilege. And then there's me being like, hey, you want to know what's funny about my period? You know, and I don't necessarily think those kinds of shows attract the kind of audience who appreciates my kind of humor. And so Bitches and Stitches is about finding the right audience, or just like showing people in Manila that there are many different ways that comedy can look like, and there are many different forms that comedy can take, and it's about getting the same types of performers and attracting the type of audience that can relate to that. Because no matter who you are and no matter how you identify, what your identity is, like you still deserve to have laughter in your life.
Yeah.
Regardless of who you are. And I think that's what Bitches and Stitches Manila is about.
And you know, like to sort of, kind of add to that, looking at the last show that we did, was that
August 14th?
August 14th, like earlier this month. And a lot of the jokes that we told there are jokes that we've been doing for years. A lot of those routines are stuff that we've been doing for quite a while. And it really dawned on me right then and there how different the response is if you're dealing with the predominantly male, cisgender, heterosexual male audience compared to if you're in an audience that's predominantly composed of women and LGBT people. And for me, that really came when I did my oldest bit, and I saw how different the response was when I did it in that audience compared to an all-male audience. So I do think that there is a lot of power when you finally get a chance to perform and share your stories around people who want to understand your experiences.
Mas gets nila. No?
Yeah.
Iba yung energy nga nung August 14. Parang sabi ko, kinakamusta nila ako? Oh, kamusta yung show ninyo? Para siyang rally ng mga babae. Kasi gets agad nila. Like, parang set up pa lang, alam na nila. Meron nga akong mga jokes na hindi nabitawan, sabi ko. Kasi parang yung lineup ng jokes ko for general audience. Tapos, inalis ko yung medyo yung hindi magigets ng mga lalaki. Di ba may shinare ako sa inyo? Sabi ko, nakakatawa ba to? Tapos, sige, ilagay mo sa next show. Tapos sabi ko, oo nga, ilalagay ko kasi puro babae to, mas magigets nila. So, mas maganda nga kung medyo structured yung ano mo na.
So, mas naging effective nga siya.
Oh, mas naging effective siya. Kasi napapansin ko, like, nung Saturday, may mga, sa audience, yung mga pumalakpak talaga, mga LGBT, mga babae. So, parang when I went down on stage, sila yung, uy, good job. Nakakatawa kasi parang, nakarelate sila dun sa mga jokes ko for women talaga. So, parang iba kapag yung inayos talaga na yung audience, pang babae talaga yung show.
Yeah. I think also ever since I've been back here, kasi when I started out in London, because the scene's so big, diba? Like even niche audiences like femme clubs or like gay clubs, like they're big. So parang all the material that I was working on was towards that sort of crowd. So parang when I came back here, I was like, oh, I really have to write very differently. But it was really nice to have that back again with Bitches and Stitches. And also parang since I've been back and I've been telling people na like, especially other women who I meet that are like, oh, I'm a stand-up comedian. And they're like, I love stand-up comedy. And parang the way that they talk about it, it's like a secret of theirs. Na like, I really love stand-up comedy. I'm like, oh, but do you go out much? They're like, no, not really. They're like, parang they feel like they don't, it's like a big step for them to go into those spaces. So, but when I tell them that like, oh, it's like all female, like it's very welcoming and inclusive, and these are the kinds of jokes that we talk about, they're kind of like, that seems like a place that I'd want to be. It seems like the kind of jokes that I would like. Because they're like, sometimes it's just like, if it's, I want to hear jokes that I can relate to, and I was just like, yeah, no, we've got the place for you, girl. Like we got you, queen.
I think it's important. I mean, laughter ultimately, I think, is about connection, right? It's not something we can necessarily control. Laughter is like a primal response to something that we think is funny. And it's the easiest way, they say, to connect with people. If you share a laugh with someone, you don't have to know each other. You don't have to speak the same language. But if you both think something's funny, it's the fastest way to establish a connection with people. And I think it's important that different kinds of people, and women, queer people, see themselves represented in comedy, because it's telling stories. And you want to see yourself represented in those kinds of stories that are told. Otherwise, how are you going to feel that you can relate, and how are you going to appreciate the art of stand-up comedy? And I think we can all agree that everywhere in the world, even Hollywood, stand-up comedy has been a boys' club for a very long time. And but that's going to change. I'm a true, firm believer that it's starting to change and will continue to change for the better as we give more women opportunities to get on stage. And even just hearing from women like, oh, I like comedy, but I'm afraid to sit in front because I don't want the guy to make fun of me. I want to create the kind of space where women will be like, no, I want to sit in front. I want to see all the action. I can't wait to like see this comedian up close. It's those kinds of safe spaces that I think we want to create, where you're comfortable to show up as yourself, but also just like laugh your ass off because you feel seen, because you feel understood.
Like, if I can like kind of jump in on that, one of the most powerful things for me, and I'm coming from this as a transgender woman in a scene with mostly cisgender women, and I'm going to go to the both of you on your different bits, like the bit you did about how you have the big hands and the DDS bit that you did. Hearing those bits for me was very powerful, because even though we have very different life experiences, those were still things I could relate to and connect to as a transgender woman. So hearing those jokes, like regardless if I was a comedian or just an audience member, and knowing that we can have that connection on that level is such a beautiful and powerful thing. And I think in a lot of the comedy that we're doing and that we're making, all together in this community, in this scene, I think we have such an amazing opportunity for people to really come together and realize we really do have a lot more in common than we think we do.
You mentioned kanina na you have different styles. So how would you describe your comedic style, each one of you?
I am very confrontational, very loud, very in your face. I like to talk about things that people don't like to talk about or even think about. I think ultimately whether my jokes are bastos or whether they're political or about like gender equality, because I can do all those kinds of jokes, but I like to do comedy that forces people to look at the world in a different way.
Nice.
I would describe my comedy as your intrusive thoughts come to life. Because I feel like I like a lot of really like random topics. But I mean, I am mostly like, I would say like I'm storytelling / observational. But it's usually a lot of like, lately I've been talking about things that I'm like insecure about in my body, which I think is something that like as women, you know, we've all been socialized to be insecure about something. But I try to break it down in a very like casual way, but it's always just like, what if? And then insert really intrusive thought. Like, parang I shouldn't have said that, but I've said it already. So I guess we're gonna talk about it for like 10 minutes. You know?
Therapy kasi.
Yeah, I'm just like, I'm really sorry. I should be in therapy, but I haven't had time to say it. So dito na lang sa open mic.
Or mas mahalang therapy.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, I also talk about things like my relationship with like my family and like I think especially when I was I don't talk about it. I feel like it reflects also where I am in life. When I was living in the UK, I talked a lot about my experiences as like an immigrant, as a Asian woman living in like a mostly white place. But because I'm back home, I don't really have to talk about that stuff anymore. But now I've been trying to like, you know, I mean, successfully and unsuccessfully, it's like, you know, talking about things like my relationship with like Catholicism or like being like I had a recent bit about like how big my hands are, and it's just generally but it's like kind of like the hero. This is how big they are.
Do you feel lost, doubting yourself, and tired? You question your worth and existence? Well, I'm here for you. Hey, this is Gailey Chavez, and I'm the host of Free Yourself Podcast. My podcast talks about self-love, self-discovery, and growth. This is for everyone who wants to live their fullest life and become the person that they could be. Let me help out and remind you that this is your life, your path, that you are not broken, and you are worth it. Catch me every Friday at 8 p.m. See ya!
Oo nga.
Diba?
Tama.
Audience, if you want to try. Here. But it's kind of like,
Oh my God.
here,
Oh my God.
right? No, I have huge hands. And the thing is, it's more of like, I mean, sure, it's goofy, but it's like the image of what a Pinay should be like, and like, does she fit into that very narrow mold?
Very demure, very mindful.
Very mindful. But yeah, that's me. Intrusive thoughts is the key takeaway. How about you, Ronnie?
I think kind of like you, my stand-up is very story-driven and also observational. But I do know that my comedy can also get very political and very satirical, because I do like examining things in popular culture and laughing at the things that make it absurd and try to find ways to make it even more absurd than it already is. It's only now that I've started to feel comfortable enough to actually start sharing my opinions and my feelings towards sex, towards dating, towards gender, and towards life. So I think I've finally got to that point where I can feel a little bit more comfortable in being vulnerable with an audience. And I think the goal with the comedy that I've started to write, especially from a trans lens, is that I want to show that, one, we can be as funny as everyone else, and two, that we are a different kind of woman than cisgender women, and that's okay. So I know I'm slowly getting there. I'm finding that balance. Yeah.
How do you deal naman with bombing?
I leave. Okay, bye. Okay, thanks, bye. I think if there's nothing I can do to salvage my set, I just end my set early. I just know. I always know when to leave a party. That's my superpower.
Pero sometimes kasi pag when it comes to time, especially corporate, yung bayad ka, like they pay you for 15 minutes, you have to do the 15 minutes kahit tumatawa sila o hindi, you
that's
have
fair.
to finish it.
If I'm actually pretty decent at corporate gigs. I've never bombed a corporate gig. I was actually a host before I was a comedian. So corporate events, I think you can joke about stuff that everyone laughs at, but it has to be mababaw. You can't really get very political, talk about religion, or, you know, like
Sensitive.
HR red flags at a corporate gig. So you just have to be mababaw, and I think that's why I've never bombed a corporate gig. But if I bomb a paid gig also, and I can't just leave if it's not an open mic, then the easiest thing to do is make fun of myself. Right? And be like, what, you don't like feminists or pubic hair? You know, and then people kind of laugh at me. So then, yeah, I turn myself into a clown is the short answer.
I think, yeah, exactly. I don't leave. I'll just if I know I'm bombing, I'll just suck it up and be like, if it's an open mic, then I'm like, I mean, whatever. I feel like what's nice is, especially if you're in a room full of comedians, for the most part, if you're bombing, they're not going to be like, ha ha. They're going to be like, oh. Yeah. It's okay. Next time, I know when I've done I know when I've done well, when people come up to me afterwards, they're like, oh, I love this joke. Like, whoa. And then if I've done badly, they're like, wow, you're so brave. I could never do what you do. Wow. Like, so do you memorize it? Like, or like, do you just come up with it? Oh, wow. Yeah, I could never do what you do. And I'm just like, that's okay.
Small talk after.
Exactly. And I'm just like, oh, it's fine. Like, let me go home. But I think I think that's the sort of like, I've been lucky. I think because I've only done like a very small amount of like paid and corporate gigs that I've been so like, I must do amazing or they're never gonna hire me again. Like I think I just try to like get it out as clean as possible. So I haven't had that experience yet, but I will take your advice and just make fun of myself when that happens.
Naalala ko kasi si Ron Dolatre, sabi niya after ng set, after the show, after open mic, sabi niya, uy, ang ganda ng set mo, nag-open mic.
Oh my God, hindi mo sinabi.
Ayoko sabihin, syempre.
Don't name names. That's not name and shame.
Some comedians say that never blame your audience. Do you believe so too?
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
I think that as a stand-up comedian, we're really doing a service here because people have paid money to be entertained that night, right? And so they're expecting a payoff.
Yeah.
And you can't really blame your audience because I think it's part of the job as entertainers to find a way to entertain them, to find a way to connect with them.
Correct.
And I've seen also some comedians with egos be like, well, you know, in Dubai they think it's funny. Like, well, you're not in Dubai, right? This is the Philippines, my friend. And I don't think it's the right attitude to have necessarily because we're here to make people feel included in the jokes. We want them to be in on the jokes, not to feel excluded by them. So I think that comedians shouldn't necessarily blame the audience. They should just reframe their storytelling or find a way to incorporate something else into their act.
I think that's where like some people sort of do freak out and freeze a little bit, because I think a lot of people do try to write and stick too hard to their own material and stuff like that, that they don't give a lot of leeway for the way an audience is going to react.
Right.
And I think that's one of the benefits for me coming from wrestling, because in wrestling, the audience can be very volatile. And as much as you prepare for things, you don't know how they're going to respond when it's actually there. So I think being in that sort of environment where I don't know how people are going to react, even if I've tried to plan everything out, sort of put me in a position where I need that chemistry with the audience. And I think that's something that a lot of comedians just don't know how to manage. And if they deal with an audience member that may react differently to what they were expecting, I don't think a lot of them know how to handle that.
During your tours in other countries, when you do comedy, do they have like a particular type of humor? Like in UK, it's usually dry humor, is it? Like Ricky Gervais?
I don't know though, because I don't have dry humor at all, and in the UK I've done all right.
You're very wet.
Yes, yes, I'm completely wet. I'm soaking, and I don't think they have different types of humors necessarily that's characterized by
The
a
country,
geography, but they definitely have attitudes towards audience behaviors. Like I've performed in Japan and I've performed in Hong Kong, and they are self-conscious about laughing out loud.
Like, they just do that. The
Because
Japanese.
kasi Chinese sila, ganon?
Japanese.
And
Japanese,
Japanese also,
oo.
Japanese and Chinese, I think, are self-conscious about being seen to laugh out loud
Even
about
the males?
specific topics. Even the men. And I've done shows in Hong Kong where I've had an audience member come up to me and say, "You were so funny," and I'll be like, "Bitch, you didn't laugh one time. One time this whole show, I did not see you laugh."
So the audience is very quiet.
Inside. They're very quiet. That's what I love about Pinoy audiences, is they're so expressive.
You can see the halak.
Yeah. It's halakakan.
Halak talaga, halak.
Yeah.
I feel like in the UK, well, like I think more than anything, it's like the references can, like, obviously the references are really different. So like when I came back here, I literally had to like de-Britishize my brain.
Okay.
In terms of like, I missed out on like almost 4 years of pop cultural references, and I was like, who's Beanie? I don't know who that is.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I just found out.
But I feel like the way that like. I feel like in London, the audiences can be like pretty responsive, especially if you're in like a big like competitive night or something, and they're like, everyone has to cheer. Like the MCs are very good at like getting audiences to respond. I think that's like something that's very like a lot of them can make even the most like dead ma audience like alive. But I feel like a lot of British people respond to jokes kind of like, that was clever, rather than like laughing, and they'll be like, smart. And I'm like, please give me something, and they're like, in my head, you
I'm
were
laughing,
amazing.
You were
Families
lovely.
like that.
Is it easier to talk about taboo topics sa abroad
than
more
here.
than topics?
I think so. I think especially in terms of like women's issues.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I go to I everyone's like really like, you can talk about things like reproductive health and like and women's medical care very easily because it's available over there, whereas here it's like you can't get those, you don't have access to these sorts of things. Or like people talk about, I mean, it depends on the country, like specific countries like you can't talk about religion, whereas in the UK it's just like everyone makes fun of religion, it's fine. I found that actually, like at least in the clubs that I've seen, what's nice is like the audiences tend to be, especially like in big cities like London, the audiences, at least in the clubs that I've been to, tend to be very, liberal. So if you have a comic that comes in and like, for example, like a male comic that's like, who makes a lot of like misogynist jokes or like homophobic jokes, that actually goes down really badly. And like people will be like, oh, can't believe he said that. And so like you could feel the energy shift.
Yeah.
Like I remember I went to a show I did a show in Paris, and there was an American comic, and he made a joke about like school shootings. And everyone went. You could feel the energy of the room
tension,
like drop, and it was just so like everyone was like, "Oh, you." After the show, there I think it was the same comedian. No, and then after that, a guy made a joke about like sexual assault,
Yeah.
which also made the room go. And then so afterwards, we were all chatting at the bar, and they were like, "You shouldn't have made that joke." And he was like, "I know, I won't make it next time," which is it. I don't like. I feel like it's good that there are those parameters. I mean, of course, there are places that you could say any of that, but I think for the most part, the taste of the audience is very. We have like lines that you shouldn't cross.
Yeah.
But especially like if it borders on like offensive stuff can really turn audiences off over there.
Pero yung mga offensive jokes na ganyan, parang feeling ko pwede siyang gawin, pero it should be really well written.
Yeah, exactly.
Na everyone will be laughing at the punchline.
Yeah.
Na they will forgive you for bringing up
Or
that
you come
topic.
back sa dulo. That there's a comeback, or there's like a redeeming factor in the end that you don't really mean to offend. Something like that.
Kasi si GB, meron siyang school shooting joke, pero nakakatawa siya. Kasi yung comeback nga niya na, basta, hindi ko na sasabihin yung joke. Kailangan magbayad kayo.
I think, it's also up to the comedian and the intent of what the joke is.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there's a lot of comedians we do enjoy who have very offensive material, but the intent behind the joke,
Yes, the intention.
Well.
it's the intention is good. Whereas with some people, I'm sorry to
It's just
say,
putting
the
it out there.
intention,
Yeah.
it's not.
It's hateful.
It's hateful.
Yeah.
Punching up versus punching
Yeah.
Yeah,
down.
agreed.
And
agreed.
I think those people sort of forget that they're punching down or don't realize they're punching down. I don't know.
It
Just
comes
in my
with the
experience.
personality also. I mean, those people might really be just evil.
Yeah.
I mean, there are cunty comedians. There are. I mean, not all of us are amazing. There, bad people come in all shapes and sizes and occupations.
Yeah.
That's true.
Kaya important din to advertise yung tama, like kunwari if dark jokes talaga, then advertise it as
Yes.
dark kami so
Yeah.
please disclaimer na yun yung
Yeah,
nasa
yeah.
poster parang ganun.
I think it's a big job also when you promote a certain kind of show, that the audience will walk in there already knowing what kind of show they're
Expectations.
supposed to expect, right? But then I think there's a missed opportunity there, and also a chance to turn someone off stand-up comedy if a show isn't marketed like in the right or promoted in the right way. I think that's the job of the promoters talaga, to really make sure that people know what they're paying for
Yes,
when they
tama.
show up.
In other countries, what's the ratio of women to men? I don't know if men.
Na comedians?
Comedians.
I would say the UK is 50-50.
Yeah,
Wow.
I would agree.
Yeah.
It's progressive.
It's very progressive, and not just specific kind of women. Also, it's like the full spectrum. I've seen lolas do it. I've seen like 13-year-old girls do it. It's. I was very impressed with the diversity, not just in terms of it's 50-50 men and women, also the types of women who are
age.
telling jokes on stage.
Lifestyle.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think also like if you're in a big city like London, because there's so many like people who are involved in the performing arts there, like it's kind of just like a natural progression into like stand-up comedy, but there's so many different types, like and you can have like fully like musical comedy nights, or like fully like people who do clown and like or like and like anti-comedy, which is like a huge thing over there, and it's like you go to these shows and you're like, it's built as a stand-up comedy, but I'm unsure of what's going on. But okay,
Anti-comedy, like Steve Martin, maybe. Or
no, anti-comedy is
Dimitri
very like parang, how do I describe anti-comedy? It's, I think one,
Like Andy Kaufman and
yeah, like Andy Kaufman, or like
Chaotic.
very chaotic, or like someone's just screaming. Like I think a friend of mine went to a show where the comedian was just dressed in like a clown suit. I don't remember all the details, but basically it was just like screaming at people on the mic. But then that's what they paid for because it was billed as anti-comedy. It's very.
But people laugh.
I think I'm not sure. It's not it's personally not my cup of tea, but apparently it's very popular. But it's just
easier
very
because
different.
you're just gonna shout. It's
Yeah.
easier than stand up.
I can do that.
I can do that. Yeah, anyone can do that.
Would it be okay? I went to an open mic, and the headliner was this guy who had an inflatable pool, an inflatable kiddie pool that he filled with beer coasters that he had written poems on, and then he asked an audience member to randomly pick one and read the
it.
poem.
Okay.
He to randomly pick one, and he
he
would
read
read the
it.
poem. Is that anti-comedy? I
I
don't know what that was, girl.
I think you should have
Supposed to
researched it a little bit more before bringing it up.
Okay.
I am not the expert, but I feel like maybe. But it's just very like avant-garde type of thing, right?
It's not your standard
it's not your standard.
setup,
Yeah.
punchline, tag.
But
okay.
but like the ones that I've really grown to appreciate recently are people who are like trained clowns. When they really like when they do, because it's like at first you're like, what are they doing? But then you realize that they're like the physical comedy that comes through, and the way that they're able to just use their body to like tell a joke. It's like when it's done really well, it's incredible.
May napanood akong ganyan. Koreans, ong-als.
Yeah.
They're called ong-als. But they don't have, yung, parang man baby sila. Parang ganon, man baby sila. So you don't need to be, hindi English, hindi ano. Basta talaga,
Parang mime. They don't talk.
parang ganon lang.
It's mime.
Tapos nakakatawa talaga sila. As in, talagang sila yung pinaka nakakatawa sa festival na yon. So, mga clowns sila yun, mga man babies.
When you do sets also abroad, do they expect you to have a certain accent or like, do you use an Asian card?
yes.
Yeah, really?
I think it's hard not to comment on it because of this. Because this is how I look. And it's hard not to comment on it, especially if there's like a predominantly white audience or just a predominantly male audience. It's hard not to comment on the fact that I'm a woman. I'm not gonna pretend that I know jokes about PlayStation or cryptocurrency. That's just not me. That's just not me. My identity is what I have, so that's what I use. So yeah, I do play an Asian card, I think, when I perform abroad. And a lot of my jokes are about my husband.
Oh, okay.
I'm married to a white British guy who's older than me.
Yeah.
It's super
Wait,
original,
10 years, right? Is it 10 years?
10 years older than
Yeah.
me. I know, I'm so original. I've never heard of a Filipina marrying an older British guy for a visa.
At least he's not a senator.
But so I can't not comment on that. And I'm really lucky that I have a partner who appreciates
He watches you all the
humor.
time.
He watches every show. He even buys the tickets.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a very supportive partner, and I'm really, really grateful that I have someone like that in my life.
Don't cry.
Yeah, I'm not gonna cry. I'm not a crier. But yes, I very much play the Asian card. But I also play the I'm dating a white guy card.
Yeah.
I think I sound like this, so already I feel like but yeah, definitely I would play the I try not to, I think especially in the beginning I would try not to like use it too much, but then I would make like general like look, I'm an Asian person in this like international city kind of card, or like haha, guess like here's something that most white men don't know, I don't speak Japanese, like that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I'm only funny in English. I've tried. I will get better at it. But so I feel like I can, like when I go abroad, like I'm just kind of like, oh, it's the Asian girl who does like, rather than talking about like very specific Filipino things, unless I can find a way to kind of like link in like something that I think that people can relate to.
Oh, yeah.
I generally just go Pan-Asian is what I'll play. But because it's part of it. So yeah.
Ikaw din, di ba, what do you call this? You perform abroad din, di ba?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. But it'll come.
Uh-uh.
It'll come. With me right now, I'm really just more focused on writing material and testing out the material.
Okay.
That's why I'm okay with my sets not being recorded or anything because I know it's a work in progress. And by the time we get to October, I know I'm going to have that set.
Yeah.
So I'm just okay with writing it because once I have that, then I'll be comfortable to go to more places and travel more and see if I could get people to connect with me on that level.
I think it will be easier for you because you have the language already. I mean, for the rest of us, our first tongue, what do you call that?
First language.
First
Native
tongue.
native
Or
tongue.
yung iniisip natin,
Oo,
Tagalog
and then we have to
talaga.
translate in English.
Oo, we think Tagalog.
We think Tagalog.
So it's
harder to
harder to
translate
Also,
the joke in
you know,
English.
that is something I really do wish I knew better. I wish my Tagalog skills were a lot better because when I do see people perform and write in Tagalog, knowing how in its own way complex and lyrical Tagalog can be, I think it's such a beautiful language that should be translated into stand-up as a format.
Because it's easier to do puns, actually, being Tagalog. Is
There's
there that?
also some words that just sound better.
Yeah.
funny
Tagalog.
words.
Funny
Yeah.
words.
Funnier in Tagalog.
Yeah.
And you know, Tagalog is such an expressive language too. And I feel so bad that the only time my Tagalog comes out is either if I'm inebriated or if I'm around people who don't speak Tagalog.
We
So
don't even know the word inebriated. What is that?
Google lang.
like drunk, kind of
okay.
altered headspace. Because it'll just come out. Or if I'm angry, it'll come out.
Baliktad. Di ba? Pag lasing, nag-i-English siya, baliktad na Tagalog.
Mga Pinoy ganon.
Yeah.
Oo,
That's
baliktad sa
interesting.
kanya. Parang ako, nag-open mic ako sa Singapore. So, yung Tagalog ko, normal eh. So, parang hindi ko kailangan mag-panic or what kasi kung meron ako nakalimutan, basta blabber lang ako ng Tagalog. Doon kailangan ko talaga ulit-ulitin sa ulo ko yung yung set ko ng English. Ulit-ulitin ko. Kaya before, kailangan isang buong araw talaga ako nag-uulit ng joke in English sa utak ko bago ako sumalang. Para hindi ako mapahiya. So, kaya mas memorize ko yung English set ko kaysa yung Tagalog set ko. Kasi yun nga, inuulit-ulit ko siya.
But you know, that's also where I think it's really amazing that a lot of the Tagalog-focused comedians have started doing a lot of English language open mics because I don't think I would survive Tagalog language open mic. I think it's the moment I get on stage, it's okay, bye. It's no, bye. So the fact that a lot of comedians here are bilingual and can switch between, I think that's such a powerful thing.
It's so impressive.
Yeah. And it's seamless as well. But I'm man, the fact that the jokes are just hitting in English and hitting in Tagalog. I'm just
It's very impressive. Yeah.
But also, it's limiting.
Pero
Because you can
mahirap
only do
siya
that in the
kasi iba yung
Philippines.
rhythm eh.
Oh, that's true.
Kunwari yung rhythm mo sa Tagalog is na. Yun yung punchline. No? Yun talaga, na. Kasi kailangan mo
explain
explain.
mo pa eh.
For them to realize kung ano, to get what you're saying. Parang ganon. So, medyo kailangan mong
lalaruin mo yung wording.
There's really it's one of those things where one of the frustrating things about English for me is that it's not a very emotional or expressive language.
Descriptive. Like, for example, the scents.
Yeah.
Mapanghi, it's not just stinky. It's different description per type of like the P is mapanghi. Yeah. Ano pa ba iba? Basta yun.
Parang yung punchline ko na tambay, nakakatawa siya kasi talagang alam mo yung tambay. Talagang, alam mo na yung itsura ng tambay eh.
You can easily
Pero translate ko
visualize
siya, ginamit ko unemployed. Yung unemployed pwede
homeless.
namang maayos ka pa din.
Sabagay, tambay doesn't mean homeless.
Diba?
Yeah.
Unemployed
Tambay is really just
tambay.
Oo, tambay, alam mo, labas tiyan na agad. Parang
the jersey.
Tsaka alam mo mabaho. O tambay.
Yeah.
I do have a question here. Do you think the reason why we all feel the need to like explain or translate certain things is because our perception of stand-up as we know it has been mostly shaped by like Western comedians, so we sort of feel like the need to like have to over-explain certain things which sort of come naturally to us. I don't know, just thinking out loud.
Parang siguro we have to explain, to paint a picture muna bago sabihin mo yung punchline. Para impactful yung punchline mo. Parang ganun. Parang
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
Ano naman masasabi mo kay...
Hindi, ito, let's talk about roasting. What do you think about roasting?
I think Fran is good at it.
Yeah.
Because you roast yourself sometimes.
Yes. I did not necessarily feel comfortable with how much I like it.
But
I have a lot of sisters. And a kind of like Carino Brutal type of family culture.
Yeah.
And when I participated in my first roast battle, they put me up against my best friend Jenna.
Ooh. So how was it?
The only two women who are from the same comedy group. I don't know, the producers thought it would be funny to make us roast each other. It was really brutal. Because she said, look, I love you. I just want you to know that, you know, I'm really happy that we're doing this, but I'm going to kill you and then I'm going to eat you. And I was like, oh, bitch, it's on. Friendship over. Friendship over. I'm going to win. And I won. There's no I in team. There's I in win. And I think the producers were shocked that we actually did not hold back because we know that our friendship is stronger than
Where was
like,
this, Hong Kong?
a roast battle. Yeah. And in terms of roasting, I think there's a way naman you can do it without making somebody feel inferior. Not inferior, but like feel like hated. Without making them feel like their identity is like hateable. There's a certain way you can do it. My favorite roast that I ever wrote for someone, it was this British comedian who's very, you know, very white, very average looking. And I said, you know, you look like a Harry Potter character was cursed to spend the rest of eternity inside a funhouse clown mirror. Kasi ganun yung face niya. That's my favorite one that I've ever written, and I didn't get to use it on him because I didn't progress to the next round. But so I'm saying it on the
heckle it
podcast.
from the audience, be like, you look like you're in a clown mirror.
Funhouse mirror face.
Ganun nangyari sa amin ni Jeline.
Pinagtapat sila?
Pinagtapat kami. Like kami, pero we didn't hold back then.
That's fun, yeah.
I think that's the mistake. They think that like it's going to be like a bit more respectful or a bit more PC, but
Hold
it's
back,
not.
yeah.
If you're friends, no way, man.
We friends pala tayo.
Mas naging close nga kayo, sabi mo.
Oo, mas naging close kami ni Jeline after that. Pero hindi na kami naging close ng asawa niya.
Ayun lang.
And you know what? What I love about that roast battle, because I went after GB not proposing to Jeannie.
Oh.
And then a month later, he had a show, and then he proposed to Jeannie.
Thank you, Jeline.
Thank you, Jeline.
Because of you. How about you guys? About roasting, like, is it?
So I haven't been in a roast battle yet, but I feel like I'm only really. I feel like roasting is a nice way of expressing when it's done well. It's a nice way parang of expressing how well you know someone.
Yeah.
Like my
True, true.
relationship with one of my best friends. Like I'd do anything for her. She'd do anything for me. All of our text messages are like, oh, here's some fake flowers to go with your fake face. Like, I'm sorry, this invite's only for friends. I was like, who said we were friends? That kind of thing. I feel like, especially like among women,
Yeah.
like
Can
roasting
get away
is
with
such
it.
like a nice
Lambing.
way of just like
Carino
it's
Brutal
like
nga.
it's Carino Brutal
Yeah.
na like it's like that's how you can express like especially because we're all expected to be like demure and
Yeah.
like you're the best because I feel like being kind of like fake positive, not fake positive, but just being so positive all the time can get like a bit annoying and tiring.
It's not authentic.
It's not authentic.
Yeah.
Or it's just kind of like, if you're able to roast somebody, it's like, it's fun to participate in, but also just it shows like how much you know that person. Oh, yeah, I don't know, but I would really like to go into a roast battle, but I'm also very sensitive and I will probably cry. But don't bully me.
Just do it in the banyo like a winner.
Like a winner.
Do it in private.
Pareho kayo ni Kay.
Oo, kasi para nung nakaraan, naghahanap pa na ulit ng ng roast battle participants. Etong tatlo, Kay, go na, sumali ka, ganyan. Sabi ko, dalawa lang yan. It's either iiyak ako o sasapakin ko. Yung kalaban ko, dalawa lang.
Sapakin mo na lang.
And I think it takes a lot of writing skills to roast someone.
Yeah.
Because if it's done like inappropriately, it's not funny. You're just really being offensive.
Yeah.
And you can't go too long also, diba? Like there has to be like a
Snappy.
rhythm. Yeah.
See, my worry when I roast is that I may accidentally and unintentionally cross the line. Because I come from a family where sometimes, again, Carino Brutal, where, for fun, we'll punk each other or we'll roast each other, and we can be very sarcastic. So I think because I was raised in that environment, I always have to think a little bit ahead to make sure that I can find a way to soften the blow or make things easier. In one roast battle, like roast kind of debate battle I did on TV with a friend, it came to a point where I was so worried about going too hard that I actually ended up feeding him stuff to roast me with, just to make sure, it didn't seem
To
as
soften lang
one-sided.
yun. Pero roasting in roast battles is different from roasting among comedians. Like, kasi, ewan ko sinasabi nila na pag inaasar ka ng comedian, tas comedian ka din, tas naasar ka, hindi ka komedyante. What do you think of that? Like, do you always have to na parang tanggapin, tapos rebut ka? Parang ganon.
I think it's very different if you consider certain dynamics. So when I started doing comedy in Hong Kong and the boys would roast me, they'd be like, "No, this is what it's like in comedy." And I'm like, "Well, why do you get to say what it's like in comedy? I should get to say what it's like to be in comedy also." And I don't think anyone's identity should be a punchline. That's what I believe. And they're like, "No, this is how it's always been." I'm like, it wasn't always like this. There were other people who were kind of the biggest producers in comedy that gave you your start, right? And then you went and you changed the formats of how comedy was done. And I think that's one thing that we have to take into consideration also. It's just like, yes, it is one thing to like roast another comedian, but crossing a line, I don't necessarily believe in. I think you can go too hard. And I think it's important to think about intent also. Like, are you trying to be hateful or are you just being constructive and having fun? Right? Are you being considerate of someone's identity, or are you being inconsiderate and just trying to make yourself look funny? I think that's the important thing to consider. And it's also, worth noting that I think that mentality is also going to be a thing of the past quite soon, because the world around us is changing also, right? We're being more aware and more in tune with like other people's like emotions and how they react to certain things and what is disrespectful and what is not. I think that's the real skill. If you can be funny without having to punch down, there's a real skill in that.
And sometimes it gets lazy too. Like,
Yes.
it's not even funny. They just said something shocking. And people are laughing.
Tama. Oo nga. So, may upcoming show tayo, di ba?
Yes. We have a show on Saturday, September 7 at A Fine Mess in Poblacion on top of Tetsuo, the most delicious fried chicken and noodles I've ever had in my life. It starts at 8 p.m. and we would like the other Lady Bosses to join us when you are ready.
Oo nga eh.
Please do.
I also would like the other Lady Bosses to join.
Yes.
Bitches and Stitches Manila is not going anywhere. We've got other shows coming up in October, November, December. We might take a break.
Yeah.
But who knows? We'll see, right?
Yeah. I feel like I just want this to carry on.
It will.
Yeah.
And I mean, as I've said before, I think that Bitches and Stitches, like the three of us are going to be here forever or until the next 3 or 300 women come and take our place.
Woo. Tsaka, gusto ko pa yung meron kayong open mic. Yeah, yung batuhan ng jokes. What do you call this? Bouncing of jokes.
Workshops.
Workshop.
Our workshops are awesome, by the way.
May online international.
Yeah, we do like virtual monthly comedy writing workshops where anyone can dial in. Anyone can dial in. We have different women from 5 countries now dialing in every month. And sometimes there's 5 of us, sometimes there's like 10.
So all existing stand-up comedians, or they want to learn more about it?
Anyone, if you want to learn, if you're already doing comedy, as long as you're female identifying, female presenting, then you can join.
And one of the most powerful things about our workshops literally happened like last Sunday. So we had open mic in Wicked Dogs. Before we did that, we had a comedy writing workshop, and about half of the jokes that we all told in our own sets were jokes we had written 2 hours earlier.
Wow.
And they were all jokes about funerals. I don't know why yun yung napili kong prompt for the workshop. But that's the one I chose. So all of us came up and took turns talking about our funerals or other people's funerals.
What's your next
topic?
next workshop?
I have to check my phone, which I left outside. But it's happening in September.
Okay,
Late
sige.
September.
We'll be joining next.
20-something. Sige, I'll send you guys the details.
Virtual naman eh.
Yeah, virtual
Itong
siya.
mga lady bosses na to.
Yeah.
English.
So, mula sa kaboses ninyong excited na sa rally ng female sa show on Saturday, Jeannie Lakay.
Mula sa kaboses nyong hindi na masyadong makarelate sa usapang comedy dyan.
Wala sa kaboses niyong naniniwala na ang kababaihan ay nakakatawa rin. Si D.
Mula sa boses nyo, excited nang bumalik ng stand-up. Kay Asko, kami ang
Lady Boses!
The opinions of podcast creators, hosts, and guests are not necessarily reflective of the official stance of the Pod Network Entertainment, its hosts, or other network programs. The content created by the people behind the podcast is personal and not meant to harm any religion, ethnicity, group, organization, company, or individual.